Greetings and welcome once again to LegalizeFreedom.com. I'm your host Greg Moffat, and today we'll be talking with Andy Duncan. Andy is an Austrian economist in the tradition of Mises, Rothbard and Hoppe, and he runs the educational website thegodthatfailed.org and can occasionally be heard running his own podcast called Radio Free Market World Report, and you can find that at radiofreemarket.com. That's all one word, radiofreemarket.com/world-report. You will of course find these links at legalizefreedom.com. Andy also works within the global banking industry as a freelance private educator, teaching many varied clients about derivatives pricing, securities analysis and finance in general. The subject of today's discussion is a general one revolving around the ideas contained in a book entitled Democracy, the God That Failed, which was published back in 2001 and written by German economist and libertarian anarcho-capitalist philosopher Hans-Hermann Hoppe. Now, to outline the contents of the book, I'm quoting here from Andy Duncan's own review of it. The book is based on the premise that the privately owned governments of the monarchical age, such as the Austro-Hungarian Empire, were bad, but far better than the publicly owned governments of the democratic age, such as the USA. Having established this platform in the first third of the book, Hoppe then moves on to describe how government-free countries, adopting the spontaneous natural order of liberty, would be the best option of all, and how we could achieve this against the odds of worldwide statist malevolence. Given that liberty is clearly the best way of organising society, which will maximise the voluntary desired ends of everyone alive, and given that humans are clearly intelligent beings, most of whom have at least the potential to see this, even if they haven't reached that point yet, why is the Western world currently drowning in a swamp of welfare dependency, increasing poverty, decivilization, family breakup, graffiti, random violence, drugs culture, antisocial behaviour, fecklessness, and all the other evil stigmata associated with socialism? And furthermore, given that at least the US of A and possibly the UK approached a near golden age of liberty over 200 years ago, which only started collapsing around the time of the First World War, what is it that's driving these virulent forces of socialism and neoconservatism along, when all the evidence around us shows clearly that collectivism is the worst thing that humanity has ever had the misfortune to stumble across? That the situation is only going to get worse is also apparent, but still we sleepwalk on into these socialist superstates, such as the EU, and their eventual combined world government, muttering the mantra, more government, more government, more government, even given that the natural human condition appears to always be a wish for more freedom. Nothing, however, seems capable of halting this inevitable steamroller. Why? Now, Hoppe thinks he has the answer: democracy. Its growth in the Western world is linked directly to the growth of socialism and big government. Hoppe wonders whether this is coincidental or not. Now, due to a slight technical hitch at the top of the show, we've had to dispense with the usual hello and welcome pleasantries, so I'll simply drop right in and ask Andy Duncan what it is that makes Hoppe and the ideas contained in his writing so controversial and yet at the same time so exciting for those of us jaded with the current state of democratic government.
He is one of the very few men in the world, perhaps the only man in the world, who was sort of brave enough to challenge this kind of idea that democracy is what we should impose around the world. So you'll see now with the American government and the British government and all the Western European powers believing that we have this right to go around imposing democracy. And it's just implicit that democracy is the finest thing that's ever been created in the history of the universe. So therefore, that gives us the right to kind of give it to everyone else as a gift. And perhaps maybe it wasn't. I mean, the ancient Greeks realized it wasn't. I mean, when the Athenians tried it, sort of 5th century BC, it was invented by a guy called Cleisthenes, who was a member of the Achaemenid clan in Athens. And the reason he invented it was because he was being dominated by another family called the Pisistrated family. And there was a guy called Hippias who was running around the Persian Empire, and he was about to take over Athens with the Persians helping him. Cleisthenes invented democracy essentially to form a dictatorship of the Achaemenid clan, And from this dictatorship of the Achaemenid clan, and successfully they beat the Persians at Marathon and Platai and Salamis and a few other places. Immediately, what happens with democracy? The Athenians create a hated empire called the Delian League Empire, following all the same classic traditions that we see with the British Empire, with the American Empire. So you have this democratic core in the city of Athens, and then they go around the rest of the Aegean just imposing this horrible, hated Athenian empire, hated to the point that virtually everyone else in Greece rallied around to destroy Athens in order to crush this monster. And then democracy died for a couple of thousand years and then was sort of reborn in the Middle Ages of Europe. So, well,
it sort of legitimizes a lot of stuff, doesn't it, really, in that sense, that if it's been voted for in a democracy, then that kind of, that's the green light, and it ticks the boxes, and it can't be seen, in some people's eyes as dictatorial because, well, it's been voted. It was a fair vote.
Well, we rule ourselves, don't we? Mm. So when I get a chance every 5 years to vote for a safe Conservative MP in the Henley-on-Thames area, that means that whoever gets voted into the Parliament can do whatever they like to me. They can take all my property, they can conscript me into an army, they can conscript my children into an army, and this is all because I get this meaningless vote, which doesn't mean anything at all every 5 years. And even if I agreed with that, which anyone who votes agrees with this, that a government can do what it likes to you, because you're legitimising them by voting. Yes. So if you agree to vote, what you're saying is, I want my view to predominate, and I'll agree that the other guy's view can predominate because they've beaten me. I've only got 49% and they've got 51%, therefore they can crush me for 5 years. So when you do participate in this, you're just basically giving up all of your rights to the ruling people. And one of the reasons democracy has become so popular amongst governments is it's a great way to ensnare people, because before, in the sort of medieval times, governments were quite rightly hated and despised. But as people saw a chance of themselves getting into power, or their friends getting into power via democracy, they gave up their opposition to government. I mean, if you've read the book, you'll know this is the major idea of democracy, the God that failed, is that before democracy, the king and the family and the royal family would be despised by everybody, because everyone realised there was absolutely no chance of them ruling. So this very small percentage of the population, the royal family and their immediate surrounders, maybe 1% of the population, could tax us, and they could have silly little wars, but we would generally ignore them, pay as little as tax as possible, and tax rates would never really get above 5%, 6%. And even the second British Civil War with Oliver Cromwell, the strange thing about that, it was really a tax protest. King Charles brings in the ship tax into sort of interior counties of the UK, so there's a tax revolt that becomes the Civil War, and then as soon as the Civil War is won, people around the country think, well, I could now become a leader. And because of this tendency of people to think, well, once I might become a leader, I can give up my opposition to government, taxes are actually higher after the war than they were before the Civil War.
Well, this is one of the key points that I think that one of the first ideas in the book that was a light bulb moment for me. And I'll just quote here from a review of the book that you yourself wrote. Uh-huh. And Hoppe's essential argument is that when a monarchical king owned a territory over which he possessed a governmental monopoly of tax and judgment, he passed it on to his heirs with some amount of far-sightedness, because the whole idea was to maintain this, this regime, this line that this would be handed down, and if it was plundered and looted and whatever, it would be in no fit state. There'd be nothing of value there. So it was, don't tax the people too much, don't push them too far, and just far enough so that they put up with this, they tolerate it, they realise that they can live with it. Yeah. And the key difference, and again, it was like, wow, the guy's right. When you think about the democratic government, the sort of system that we have here in the UK, well, it's typical of democracies around the world, but in our own case, politicians are there for, relatively speaking, very short term. So their policies and their thinking is short term. And we can see this as government advances each term of government, and things get worse and worse on a number of fronts, because all the party in power has to really do is somehow fudge their way through an election or two And then it doesn't. Then it gets passed on to someone else in whatever state it's in, and then the process starts again, and so gradually downhill we go.